for the first time on an MVP caliber season, he didn't get it right. I think that's what hurts. I think for me watching this Buffalo team and thinking maybe they'd turn the corner. Maybe this was Josh Allen's legacy drive. And it was his legacy drive. It was just for all the wrong reasons.
Here's Barkley, a little shovel, looking for an edge, gets it, Saquon Barkley, first down, Barkley, oh! Saquon, touchdown!
And Saquon in space, 13 yards downfield, Chin can't get him on the ground, Martin can't get him on the ground, nobody gets Saquon on the ground again.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast, presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Hellman, and we have our Super Bowl 59 matchup. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs advance on Conference Championship Sunday. They will face off Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, and the way we got there really feels like it encapsulated this entire season. Early on, Philadelphia against Washington, Saquon Barkley running free. And later on, the end of the nail-biter we were all expecting, Patrick Mahomes taking a knee on another one-possession Chiefs win. Saquon's high-flying, yardage-gaining success in Philadelphia, and the Chiefs' ability to do just enough week after week. Two of the most emblematic outcomes of this 2024 season. Hardly surprising that we are getting a rematch of Super Bowl 57 here in Super Bowl 59. It's Chiefs, it's Eagles, but let's jump into how we got there specifically, and let's start in that early game right here on Fox. One of the more impressive performances we saw all year, dating back to September. The Eagles literally raced past the Washington Commanders, 55-23. No, that is not a typo. 55 points from Philadelphia, the highest score in a conference championship game since the 1970 league merger. Yeah, like you had scores like this in championship games if you want to go back to like 1940. But in this era, in the Super Bowl era, nobody has piled up points like the Philadelphia Eagles did on Sunday. They ran it 36 times for 229 yards. They went 7 of 7 in the red zone with an absurd 7 rushing titles. Again, the most ever in a conference title game. You want to talk about winning in style, heading into the Super Bowl with vibes as high as they could possibly be. This is it, because the Eagles dominated in every method you could imagine. They finished the day with 459 yards of offense. Jalen Hurts and the passing game woke up and did their part more than enough as well. We will get into all of that in a little bit with our guy Ralph Vacchiano of FoxSports.com. But just a celebration in Philadelphia, we'll call it, because even like Washington made it interesting in the middle 8 for a little bit, but I don't know, man. By the end of the first quarter, it felt pretty obvious that Philadelphia was going to run away with this. And as so many things with the Eagles this season have happened, it was Saquon Barkley who set the tone. Took his first carry of the game, 60 yards for a touchdown. And it's not just that. It came after probably a drive that was almost picture perfect from the Washington Commanders. They took the ball to start this game, 18 plays, burned half the first quarter off the clock, converted 2 third downs, converted 2 fourth downs, kick a field goal. You're thinking, all right, this is the recipe for an upset. You play keep away, you score points, you sustain long drives. Saquon just threw all that out the window with that one play, which you heard at the top of the show. He had another touchdown shortly after that. And like I said, it was on. And there are so many other guys that we're going to shout out here in a minute because it was a very complete effort from Philadelphia. But like everything else in this Philadelphia season, it feels like it centers around Saquon Barkley. Heading into Super Bowl 59, Barkley is 30 rushing yards shy of Terrell Davis's regular season and playoff record. So we know he didn't break Eric Dickerson's regular season record, but regular season and playoffs combined, Terrell Davis's record for all of it, 2,447 yards. Barkley, 30 yards away from setting that. 3 scrimmage yards away from breaking Davis's scrimmage yards record of 2760. 30-3, I'd say that feels pretty manageable. Barkley has already achieved football immortality with this season alone, but just goes to show you how special this year has been. With 100 yards in this game against Washington, officially 118, and 3 freaking touchdowns. He also joins Terrell Davis and Barry Sanders as just one of 3 players in NFL history to rush for 100 or more yards in 14 different games. It's been remarkable all year. He was remarkable on Sunday. It's not a surprise that as the Eagles punched their ticket to the Super Bowl, Saquon was Tom Brady's LFG player of the game.
Today's LFG player of the game, Saquon Barkley, another 100-plus yard performance, 3 touchdowns. Man, I'm so happy for you. Tell me about this. The first carry of the game, does that set the tone and change the complexion even from the first play? That was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we want to set the tone, send a message to everyone watching into this game, and man, I don't really know what to say. I'm going to the Super Bowl. I'm super excited. I'm happy for this team. It was a team effort, and the goal is not just getting in, the goal is winning. So one more. Yeah, absolutely. And when I think about last summer when the Eagles signed you from the Giants, what did you expect when they signed you? I expected this. This is why I came here. This is why I wanted to be in Philly. This is why me and my family made a decision to come here. We felt like that we can grow our family name, our legacy, and come out here and compete for championships. And here we are. It's a great way to look at it. And you've been such an unselfish player, even though you've been so exceptional this year. I highlighted your block on Jalen's quarterback run. You were the lead blocker on Luvu. Tell me about that play when they call your number to do something that normally is a little outside the realm of what an MVP running back looks like. Yeah, whatever it takes, man. That's a mindset. You can't be great. You only can be great with the greatness of others, and that's a mindset. That's what we've been doing all year. And you just got to sell out. This is a championship game, and made a big block there. Jalen made a great read and got into the end zone. Well, congratulations. You are an NFC champion tonight. You're the LFG player of the game, and we'll see you in a couple weeks in New Orleans. Congratulations. Yes, sir. Much love.
Every game that I broadcast, I award the LFG player of the game to that one player who makes me say, let's go.
Let's dive deeper into this big Eagles win and their second trip to the Super Bowl in the last 3 years by talking to somebody who was there for it. He's been there for this Eagles playoff run. In fact, bringing back in our guy, Ralph Vacchiano of FoxSports.com. Ralph, how you doing? And what was the scene in Philadelphia as this organization punched another trip to the Super Bowl?
It was pretty wild. I think there was a lot of relief in the locker room and in the stands for sure. Maybe relief is a little harsh, but remember, this is a franchise and a fan base that thought for sure they were going back to the Super Bowl last year before the inexplicable collapse at the end of the season. So they've been on a mission ever since then to, basically fix what went wrong and to get back to where they were supposed to be. And they finally did it. And I think that is something that they've been working so hard for, and in a lot of cases expecting to have happen, that, there was a lot of energy that finally came out when it finally actually occurred.
I think relief is a perfectly fair word, just when you think of the wins they've stockpiled over the last 3 years, the way the last season ended, and then you spend this year chasing history, literally, with Saquon Barkley's rushing record, going after the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. You don't get it, but then you get gifted a home game because the number 1 overall seed loses in the divisional round. So if you lose this game to a number 6 overall seed in the playoffs, I think it would have been really tough times in Philly. So I think it's completely fair to say that there's, in addition to excitement and accomplishment, obviously, a feeling of relief. And I want to talk to you because the last time we had you on, we were talking about that very fun win against the Rams and look, this is an incredible offense. Saquon Barkley's an incredible player. We know all of that. We've talked a lot about it. But you and I mentioned the passing game and the angst, whether it's fair or unfair. How can they get this thing going? How much do they need to get it going? And so I think it's only fair to say that maybe it wasn't the flashiest day ever, but man, I thought Jalen Hurts was so impressive in this game. 3 rushing touchdowns, but really just making key plays as a passer when the Eagles needed him to. It was such an impressive performance.
Yeah, it's the best we've seen of him in a while, and it is exactly what we discussed. They were going to need him at some point. He couldn't just sit back and be a game manager and let Saquon Barkley carry the way. He had to perform and show that he still, could make the big throws at the right time. And he was everything. I mean, everything we doubted about him. He was on target with most of his throws. He wasn't overthrowing his receivers or underthrowing. He was putting it right in their hands, making the right reads. His mobility, which was in doubt after his knee injury in the last game, was fantastic. Only ran 10 times for, I think, 16 yards, but, had a pretty dazzling 9-yard touchdown run. And more importantly, we saw him escape the pocket and escape trouble plenty of times. Sometimes it was just to throw the ball away. Sometimes he created a play, but, he showed that he could run and wasn't just going to be sitting back in the pocket like he did too many times late in the game against the Rams. So everything you wondered about him, whether he still had those special abilities, he showed that he did, and it's exactly what the Eagles need. He looked, without the big numbers, he looked more like the MVP caliber Jalen Hurts that we saw 2 years ago when he showed up big in the Super Bowl. And, now he's kind of given everybody a reason to believe that, if they need him in 2 weeks against whichever team they play, he's going to be right there. He still has that ability. He can still be just as good and, hasn't been reduced to the game manager that he had been looking like for a couple of weeks.
I think the criticism at times has been completely fair, to be honest with you. And look, I think so much of it comes from the fantasy football mindset of why isn't A.J. Brown having this crazy day? Why isn't Devontae Smith doing more? I don't care about that. I do not care about the statistical output of the Eagles passing game, but there have been very real times this season, including last week against the Rams, where you weren't sure if the Eagles were going to have a second pitch to go to if Saquon wasn't there for them. And sure enough, against Washington, Saquon goes 60 yards on his first touch. And then it really felt like Washington buckled down on him. And Jalen was able to make the throws to get the Commanders out of those looks. So that's what I've been looking for, is whether it's 4th and 5 and you hit A.J. Brown for that go ball, or whether you draw defensive pass interference in the end zone with a great throw to Devontae Smith. That's the type of stuff I've been looking for. My question for you is, you had a chance to speak with Jalen after the game, go to his press availability once this game was over. You just mentioned, he played like an MVP candidate in 2022. He was a second team All-Pro as well. He's now going to his second Super Bowl. What is his response to the amount of criticism that he's faced, considering everything that he's accomplished in his young career?
Well, he says he doesn't care. His stock answer is, I just care if I win. That's all that matters. I don't listen to the outside noise. I don't hear it. He doesn't care that people don't think that his numbers look good. He just cares about winning, and they win a lot. That being said, I can tell you that Nick Sirianni cares. He pretty much made his press conference about how Jalen Hurts has so many doubters and it's ridiculous, and people have to kind of get off that kick and understand that, it doesn't matter if he throws for 300 yards, he just keeps winning, and that's the most important thing. I can tell you that some guys in the locker room talked about how they think they're pretty sure that Jalen Hurts hears it. Jordan Mailata, his left tackle, said that outright, that, it's not a coincidence that he plays big in the biggest games, because he thinks he hears the noise, hears the doubters, and can be motivated by it. So I'm sure that he does hear it. I'm sure he understands. He gets a lot of questions about what's gone wrong with the passing game and whatever, and he usually has an answer for it on the field. He's certainly not bothered by it, as long as this team keeps winning. And, when you look at it in his 5 years, who's done more winning than him? I mean, 2 Super Bowls in the first 5 years of his career. 3-4 trips to the playoffs now. He's been remarkable, and it's not just because he's surrounded by great talent. He needs a little bit more credit for the things that he's able to do to keep this team on track.
it's a completely valid point, especially when you see them play the way they did in this game. And that's what I said afterward is, look, I mean, they're good enough to win 14 games, be at the top of the NFC, even with an offense that hasn't been consistent every single week. But when you put Saquon together with that type of performance from the rest of the offense, I mean, they bullied Washington in every manner imaginable. And I wanted to hit on this with you because I think the biggest indicator, the thing I'm going to remember from this game when I think about that is this sequence down by the end zone where Washington was clearly so fed up with the way Philadelphia was running the ball down their throat that Frankie Louvu and Jonathan Allen were just jumping off sides trying to stop the brotherly shove. So if we can throw to that audio real quick, I'd love to hear it.
Encroachment, defense number 93. Washington has been advised that at some point the referee can award a score if this type of behavior happens again. For now, it's a replay of second down.
I mean, I guess Ralph, you've been around this league a long time. Have you ever heard that before? And B, is that not the best snapshot of this game ever, where the refs have to be like, hey, knock it off and play this game the right way? We're sorry that you're so frustrated by what's happening to you, but this is where you're at, Washington.
Yeah, it certainly was, kind of emblematic of the Commanders' frustration. But I tell you what, I'd never heard that rule before. It is actually a rule. Unbelievably, it's a rule. The officials have the discretion of saying, we're tired of what you're doing. We can award you award your opponent a touchdown if you keep doing this. I've said for years that I don't understand why teams down at the one don't jump off sides constantly on this, on the tush push to see if they can stop and keep sending people over the top until you time it right, because the penalty is only inches, basically getting closer to the goal line. Well, now I know why they don't do it. I totally never heard of that rule before. It is an actual rule. I have to admit, it's a little crazy when you think about it, because imagine this scenario where if the Eagles have been trailing by 5 and we're down at the 1 yard line looking for the game-winning touchdown, and the officials decided we're just going to award it to you. It would be the greatest controversy in NFL history. So, obviously the Commanders, I'm sure they knew the rule. I'm sure they were trying to test it and push it as far as they can, but it was quite the sequence, because it certainly did come off looking like they were just frustrated and they had it and kind of out of ideas for, winning this ball game.
Yeah, I think I got to imagine the refs would have a slow whistle if the game was on the line, but when the game feels decided and it's just the question is, what's the final score going to be? I think the refs are a little more like, hey guys, let's all get out of here in one piece. We know where this is going, which, yeah, that feels like the theme of the day for Washington. And that was the other thing I wanted to hit on. Washington did not help here. I mean, I think you could classify this as a self-destruction on their part. Like, you talk about teams not being ready for the moment. 4 turnovers when you had, I believe, 16 heading into the game, or maybe, 15 or 16 heading into the game. You've got 4 on the day, some very untimely penalties in the red zone. I think Washington is a big part of why this score looks so ridiculous and lopsided. But having said that, I think they could have played the cleanest game of their season, and Philly wins this game still by 10 to 14 points. That's just how dominant they looked on both sides of the ball.
I do agree that they probably would have won anyway, but the game is much different. If they give up 2 early fumbles and the Eagles score on both of them, and there's your deficit at halftime. They fumble again, they have a late interception, and it's not Jaden Daniels until the end that the interception in the end zone, the game was basically decided. Up until that point, it was other players that were fumbling the ball away. It was a veteran corner that they added in Marshawn Lattimore, who was getting pass interference plays and personal fouls that were, costing them shots at the end zone. It was just, it wasn't a rookie quarterback melting down, but it was parts of the rest of the team melting down. And, look, Some of it is them. Some of it is when you play against a team like the Eagles, you make mistakes. And, credit the Eagles for going after the ball and knocking it out of the hands of some players and making sure to pounce on it. Their defense gets credit for doing that too. But, you're looking at it from Washington's perspective. Yeah, they're going to absolutely believe that they would have had a much better chance of winning if they didn't keep shooting themselves in the foot.
I think if we ran back through the tape of everything we've said on this show, we'd have a lot of regrettable takes. But one of the better takes, Ralph, is you and I saw this coming, I don't know, somewhere around late October, if I had to guess, where the defense starts rounding into form. You got so many fun young pieces there. Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell gets the interception in this game. Cooper DeJean has some contributions. You combine that with a literally historic performance from Saquon Barkley. I didn't know it was going to be Washington that they beat to get there, but this felt like a Super Bowl caliber team in Philadelphia, and it's cool to see them cap that off in style and get back to the big game.
Yeah, no doubt. They've been, to me, the best team in the NFC all year long. Or certainly the Lions could have laid claim to that at some point, but I've always thought the Eagles were built better to win. They have, when Jalen Hurts is playing well, they have the passing game. They have a diverse passing game where they can go to 3-4 different guys. They have, to me, the best rushing game in football with a dynamic running back, the best offensive line. And by about week 4 or so, the defense really clicked in. I wasn't sure that was going to be there at first, but Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator, got them playing well. They clearly picked up the system. They started getting turnovers. They started stopping the run. They did everything that you need to do, and they're just built so well to win these types of games, whether it's bad weather, late in the year. If they get up, they can bully a team with the running game. If they're down, they've got a passing game that can come back. They've just got all the tools right now, and I'm anxious to see how they perform in the Super Bowl, because when they were in 2 years ago, they were very close to winning it. They were that good, and I believe that this team actually might be better than the one from 2 years ago and might have a better chance of winning this time around.
I was thinking something similar. It's tough to say because they had 70 sacks in 2022 and they had all this veteran leadership, but the quarterback is older, wiser, more mature. They have a literal MVP candidate in Saquon Barkley. They've got so many pieces of this coaching staff that have been around the block at this point. Nick Sirianni, it's not his first rodeo. Vic Fangio has been there and done that at every level of football, it seems. Maybe it's not as overall deep as a team, but yeah, I think I have to agree with you. I like this version of the Eagles better. And if they play their game, there's so many different ways they can win this game. I'm fascinated to see how they match up in the Super Bowl.
It's not quite the same defense. They definitely don't have the same pass rush. They have a good enough pass rush, but I think they're a better tackling defense overall. I think at times the secondary is just as strong as it was, and I think the running game is just better. And Saquon Barkley gives them that element that I don't think they had 2 years ago, where teams really have to worry about how much they're going to run. Not only those big runs, which obviously he had in this game, but more often than not, also just the way they can sort of peck away at a defense with the consistent running game. It's just such a weapon, so much better, I think, than it was 2 years ago, that, it's going to be hard to stop in the Super Bowl. It really is. And Saquon Barkley is just having a magical year. It's hard to see him not having a big game, even if teams gear up to stop him. And that's what's going to happen. Would you bet against him having 150 yards? I don't think I would in this game.
You're seeing the numbers on our screen right here. I'm looking at it. Saquon Barkley has the second highest playoff rushing total prior to a Super Bowl in NFL history. The other guys that have done similar numbers, Terrell Davis and John Riggins, who A, are both Super Bowl champions, and B, both made the Hall of Fame. So pretty good company for Saquon to be keeping. Lot to get into, but we got 2 weeks to do that. For now, just a really fun moment for the Eagles and for their fans, obviously. And like I said, they did it in about as impressive a fashion as they've played all year, which makes it that much more fun to watch. Ralph, we appreciate your help throughout these playoffs. I'm guessing we'll be checking in with you in the build up to the Super Bowl as well. Thanks again, man.
My pleasure, Dave. Anytime.
The goal is always to focus on the winners. The Eagles are off to the Super Bowl. But on a show like this, on a week like this, and for a team like this, before we move on to the other part of the show, I think it's worth taking a look at this Washington Commanders team and the year that they had. And It's not going to feel like it right now. I'm sure everybody in that organization wishes that they had played a better game, regardless of the final result. It's hard to go into the offseason. I mean, obviously losing by 32 points, but also turning the ball over 4 times, just not putting your foot forward. That's going to sting for a minute, but it's worth a retrospective on just what a fun season and what a fun turnaround this was for the Washington Commanders. At this time last year, they were 4-13. They just fired their head coach. They had just 2 weeks ago this month, hired Adam Peters to be their general manager. Dan Quinn wasn't even on staff yet during conference championship weekend last year. All we knew was that they had the number 2 overall pick. And it sounds silly right now, but at the time, they had a choice to make. Jaden Daniels or probably Drake May. I don't think very many people thought Caleb Williams would be falling past the Chicago Bears at number 1 overall. What do you do? Well, I think it's safe to say they made the right choice. Jaden Daniels, the catalyst for one of the most fun turnarounds we've seen in recent memory. Best season in Washington since 1991. Longest playoff run since 1991. Last time they won the Super Bowl. And at the center of it all, Jaden Daniels, 822 yards in the playoffs, 5 total touchdowns. Offensive Rookie of the Year voting was done before the playoffs started. I feel pretty confident he was going to win it before this. But with the playoff numbers added, with his 3 playoff performances, 4,300 passing yards, 1,000 rushing yards, 37 total touchdowns. And this was with a roster that's clearly in the beginning stages of a rebuild. The Commanders were at the top of the league leaders in the most salary cap space heading into Quinn's first year, and they spent like it. They signed so many players to bring to this team, whether you want to talk about defensive pieces, Frankie Louvu, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Jeremy Chin, guys that played such a huge role for this team. On offense, you bring in pieces on the offensive line. Forgot to mention Bobby Wagner. Excuse me, Bobby. I'm so sorry. Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler. And people poked fun at him. This was thought of as like a team bringing in guys that were over the hill to just be competitive. What are these guys giving you in the twilight of their NFL careers? Turns out plenty. Absolutely plenty. You get to the conference championship game. You beat the number 1 seed. Back-to-back road wins in the playoffs. It's the first time a rookie quarterback has ever done that. First time a rookie quarterback has ever reached this stage of the postseason without a top 3 defense. Jaden Daniels did it with a very middle-of-the-pack defense. Absolutely incredible place to be. And it's got to be bittersweet because this is a league where roster turnover is a third of your team every year is not the same. And I'm not surprised to hear that when our guy Tom Rinaldi caught up with Dan Quinn after that, he focused on that aspect of it, that as fun of an accomplishment as this was, it's bittersweet to know that this is the last time this particular group of guys will have a shot at it.
Dan, I know it's not the result that you wanted. What was your message to your guys?
Yeah, I thought first thing, Tom, these are hard moments, as a competitor's life. The second thing that I said to him was savor this time with their teammates. They've created something together, this brotherhood that's second to none. Not every locker room's the same year to year. And so I wanted to make sure they took a few minutes to know what they have created here. And hopefully that's the type of style and energy that we want to play for years to come. And it's a fantastic group. I've had an absolute blast coaching these guys, man. And so there's some real competitors. And but let's give the credit to Philadelphia tonight, NFC Championship here at their spot. We've played good complimentary ball for 7 weeks, and we didn't do that today.
I hate. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in sports. I hate when people say they'll be back. It's disingenuous. It's oversimplifying. It's really hard to get to this stage of the season and be one of the final 4 teams playing or one of the final 2 teams playing. It's going to take a lot to replicate a run like this. I don't think it's fair to just assume anyone will be back. But when you got a guy like Jaden Daniels, you give yourself a chance every single year. I mentioned that there are so many veterans on this team. A lot of them might not be back. Commanders might move on. You're going to lean on your draft classes to replace that free agent production. Jaden Daniels just turned 24 years old. It's a good spot to be. We can't say for sure the Commanders will be back anytime soon, but we can say it's a fun time to be a Washington Commanders football fan, and the future, even if we can't predict it, looks bright. And man, I think that's the first time you've been able to say that about Washington football in literal decades. So this will sting for a minute, but a really fun season. I think that's worth remembering. And yeah, I think this is going to be one of my favorite subplots when we look back at 2024, that Washington football was fun and exciting once again. We recorded with Ralph when the AFC Championship game wasn't yet decided. It now is, so let's wrap it up with the big one. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Bills at Chiefs for the AFC Championship. And darn if it didn't have just the most familiar of endings. The Chiefs break the Bills' hearts, a fourth straight playoff win over Buffalo. They eke out a 32-29 win to reach their third straight Super Bowl. Truly hallowed ground, 3 in a row, 5 out of 6, the first NFL team to reach 5 Super Bowls in a 6-year span. There's so many more stats that we can get to because a run of excellence like this is going to generate some mind-boggling numbers. But to help me do that, let's get a little assist here. Bring in our guy, Henry McKenna of FoxSports.com, who's been all over this matchup all year. Who better to talk to? And Henry, I would say it lived up to the billing, and I truly, I feel for the Bills because it was right there for them, as it so often has been. But the theme, once again, man, is Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs prevail in the end.
Yeah, I think, like you said, familiar ending, familiar level of heartbreak. Here's what probably makes it sting even more than the previous ones for Buffalo, is that this has some new elements to it. First of all, the Bills rebuilt themselves this offseason. Last year, it might have been tempting to bring back Stephon Diggs. They said no thanks. Might have been tempting to bring back their older core with Mitch Morse and Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Those guys were not on the field today. And instead, they brought in a newer crowd. They brought in something younger and something different, and they highlighted those players, and that got them to a final possession against the Chiefs, which gave them the power in their hands. Whereas in previous years, we saw often Patrick Mahomes take the game by his own hand and by some mismanagement from the Bills coaching staff, steal the win away from Buffalo. That wasn't what happened in this case. This was actually about Josh Allen having 4 minutes to drain the clock and either tie the game or score a game-winning touchdown and take his team to the Super Bowl. This was Josh Allen's game to win, and he ultimately lost. I think you look at that Dalton Kincaid almost catch on 4th and 5. You look at the offensive line blowing the blitz assignment from Steve Spagnuolo. I'm not saying ultimately this is like all on Josh Allen, right? But I am saying that he did have the opportunity in a situation that it's what makes this unlike, the last postseason that finished with the infamous 13 seconds where Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier's defense allowed the Chiefs with Tyreek Hill to get into scoring position and kick a field goal that they had no business getting in 13 seconds. Like, that didn't happen here. This was just Josh Allen not converting a 4th down, not converting a 3rd down. And I don't know. I think like this is a new way for Buffalo to lose, and it was heartbreaking because actually the coaches got it wrong in some ways, and actually Josh Allen, for the first time on an MVP caliber season, he didn't get it right. I think that's what hurts. I think for me watching this Buffalo team and thinking maybe they'd turn the corner. Maybe this was Josh Allen's legacy drive. And it was his legacy drive. It was just for all the wrong reasons.
There's so much to unpack there, but I think you're completely right. And yeah, I mean, 13 seconds is its own form of heartbreak, but these were such completely different games. Like, you go back to that 2021 game, it's 1,000 yards of offense. It's 30 points being scored in the final 2 minutes. This was not that. I know, the Chiefs scored 32 points in this game. Ironically, the first time this year they go over 30 points all season is the game that sends them to the Super Bowl. So for all the hand-wringing people did about their offense, they score 32 points in the biggest game of the year. But this was a slobber knocker game, man. I mean, this was a game of a war of attrition. And you're so right. With the way this had gone, you cannot ask for a better situation. The Chiefs, so surprisingly, so against the script that we're used to from them. I was stunned when they could not execute down in the red zone in crunch time. They settle for a field goal. Mahomes gets sacked. He throws a low ball on the little screen pass. I think it was to Xavier Worthy down near the goal line. Kicking a field goal in the red zone with everything on the line is very un-Chiefs. And so you sit there and you look at it and you're like, yeah, Josh has 3.5 minutes to potentially tie, or better yet, win. This is all you could ask for. And it's not even that the Bills came up short. Steve Spagnuolo dominated that sequence. I mean, the Bills gained less than 20 yards of offense with a chance to go to the Super Bowl on the line. And yeah, the lasting memory is going to be that 4th and 5. Spags is a psychopath. Blitz is a DB. On 4th down, there's open guys everywhere. Khalil Shakir's open in the flat. Dalton Kincaid is open on the desperation, but the blitz just gets there so fast that he can't put a good throw on it. You could definitely argue Dalton Kincaid should have caught it, but it's wild that this season that we've seen from Josh Allen. Henry, you've argued that he should win MVP. We've talked about him in the thick of the MVP race all year. For them to come up as short as they did, I think it's a testament to just how complete this Chiefs team is. Because if you give Josh Allen the ball in that situation, you're saying, hey, we did enough here. We did enough. We slowed down Patrick Mahomes. We held him to a field goal. But this Chiefs defense is that clutch and that good that they can bail you out in a situation like that, a rare situation where the Chiefs offense maybe wasn't as good as it wanted to be.
Right. And if you give Josh Allen as much credit as I did for helping the Bills win last week against the Ravens, where Lamar had the better numbers, Josh Allen got the win, it's the same math if you're going to give Patrick Mahomes credit for winning this game when Josh Allen was as good statistically, maybe better in a number of ways, but Patrick Mahomes gets the win. And it's about decision making in such a micro level. Like you said, maybe he didn't complete the pass to Worthy in the flat there, but where's he putting the ball? Safety in the flat, right? Like he's not forcing the ball into the red area where it could get tipped up. It could get picked off. It could get cataclysmic. They were in scoring position in a relatively, for these teams, a relatively low scoring game. And I think, Mahomes is managing the game. He's taking control of the game. He's putting the ball into Allen's court and saying, you know what, do your worst, because guess what? My defense can do better. And that's what we saw bear out. Like it's a matter of trust that Mahomes didn't feel like he had to play hero ball multiple times this season, because he said, you know what? I might be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I might be on the way to being the greatest quarterback of all time. But I've seen Tom Brady's tape. He's the greatest. And guess what he did? He let his defense win the game a lot. He let his kicker win the game a lot. And it comes down to when the quarterback inserts himself and his greatness. Mahomes is extremely secure, you can tell, about his own legacy. He knows where it's going to land. Whether he's the greatest of all time or he's among the greatest of all time, he's going to be there. And I think, like Allen, we saw a secure looking quarterback last week, and we saw a guy who was maybe a little bit insecure this week. And it started, in the first 2 drives, right? There were the first 2 passes that looked like interceptions in the making, and he got lucky. They were dropped. There was the botched snap in the second drive, and they ended up getting a field goal on that drive, but it maybe could have been a touchdown. Who knows? If that second down play was 2nd and 10 wasn't a fumbled snap, right? Because then it puts them in behind the sticks for a long third down. They had to settle for a field goal. It's these little plays, these little moments, these little decisions that we if we put them under the microscope, which is what we have to do in the AFC Championship game, they build up and they build a legacy. And that's why Mahomes is out there just stealing legacies from Josh Allen, stealing Super Bowl appearances, stealing them from Lamar Jackson. And not in the sense that like, oh, you know, the Chiefs are robbing with help from the refs. No, like that's not the narrative here. This is a quarterback who like eats other people's Super Bowl appearances. That's just how he operates.
If that didn't hammer it home well enough, I mean, this stat should. Josh Allen is 7-2 in the playoffs against non-Chiefs teams and 0-4 against the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. It's heartbreaking if you're a Bills fan. And I love that point too. Josh said during the build up to this game that the angel on his shoulder won out against Baltimore. Remember, we talked about how he debated pitching it to James Cook down near the goal line, and he opted not to. Chaotic Josh Allen was out in force in this game. I mean, I can't speak for him. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he looked like a guy who knew what it was going to take to beat Patrick Mahomes and was trying to do everything in his power to do it, even to the point of mistake. I mean, like you said, several balls in this game that could have easily been interceptions, just chaotic fumbles, chaotic decisions where he's pitching in short yardage situations. And I can appreciate it. It's what makes him a very fun player to watch. But you compare that to the incredibly cool and calculated Patrick Mahomes. I think people who don't have an appreciation for it would call it boring because these are not the big splash Kansas City Chiefs that we got used to 5 or 6 years ago. But the precision with which Patrick Mahomes operates everything is breathtaking. And especially when you kind of compare it to this organized chaos you're seeing on the Buffalo side of the ball in a game like this.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to the way that like Xavier Worthy has somehow emerged in a meaningful way. It comes back to Travis Kelce had 2 catches and it didn't really matter for this offense. And it comes back to look at Mahomes' rushing abilities. He ran for 43 yards, I think, and 2 touchdowns, scoring, important points, important moments in the game. Like this Chiefs offense, they weren't about looking like the best offense in the league, which was kind of what I think they wanted to be at the beginning of this year. I watched them in training camp and they were like very gung-ho about attacking vertical with Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. They had Rashee Rice, who was healthy at that point. He was like a massively upgraded version of what DeAndre Hopkins is in this offense right now. And then Travis Kelce was supposed to do, actual Travis Kelce things. And we saw it last week, but we did not see it this week. And last week, I did a film breakdown of that game very closely. I think that was a bit of malfeasance from the Houston Texans defense. That was not necessarily a game born totally out of Travis Kelce's merit. So we saw him come back down to earth this week against Buffalo, and we see them just do literally anything they can to get a win. Like the Buffalo mentality on offense this year was this motto: everyone eats, right? In the Chiefs offense, it was sort of like scrap to get your food, like fight for your food. Like they were constantly battling for every yard, whether it was with each other sometimes because of like the offensive line issues, or whether it was like the pass catching group that wasn't quite clicking with Mahomes, including Kelce, who admitted it on his podcast, a few weeks ago, that he's just not on the same page as Patrick Mahomes in the red area, where Kelce only had 3 touchdowns, I believe, in the regular season. So not a normal season for the Chiefs, but Mahomes is the reason why none of that mattered. It was scrap for every yard, and we'll make sure we'll get one more than we need.
Mahomes with a very healthy dose of Chris Jones and Steve Spagnuolo. Again, we just went over the game deciding possession essentially. Also, a huge 4th down stop by Chris Jones and the Chiefs. I think that could have had a big sway in this game. Bills were driving to really take control of this game. They were aggressive. I got to give it to them. I mean, they played the way I think you need to play to beat Kansas City. They go 4 of 6 on 4th down, had a 4th down touchdown down in the red zone to Curtis Samuel. just don't get the inches that you need. I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing I'm going to hear some complaining from people about the spot on that fourth down. I would argue you could maybe try something a little more creative given the lack of push that the Bills were getting in those situations. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes is going to get you one more yard or one more point than you need. And in the rare situation where they can't, which is what happened down in the final 4 minutes here, that's a hell of a fallback option is this Kansas City defense, which they seem to be equally clutch. They will get the stop that they need, whether that's holding you to the field goal, whether that's getting the turnover on downs. It's remarkable, as are all things the Chiefs tend to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Chris Jones too, because the Chiefs ended up pressuring Josh Allen 17 times in this game. That's 46% of his dropbacks. Keep in mind that during the regular season, the Chiefs were pressuring quarterbacks at about 33%. So they go from a third of dropback pressures to half of dropback pressures in this game. And that's a sign of a clutch defense. That's a sign of Chris Jones taking over the game in a way that I think Patrick Mahomes did, but Jones almost never gets the credit for doing it. He had 7 pressures in the first half. He actually didn't get any in the second half, but he did suffer an injury, so he missed some time. Chris Jones is an absolute wrecking crew, and Josh Allen was constantly under duress from the interior, which is where every quarterback wants to go through their progression, operate within the system. And so not only did Josh Allen struggle to do that, to get from receiver 1 to 2 to 3 in his reads, but he also struggled to generate creativity. So that's a credit to the secondary, right? Because maybe he's not operating, but what have we seen Allen do so many times? Roll to his right, go hero ball, just kind of point at somebody to go downfield, and then he hucks it up there and the guy grabs the ball. That wasn't in play at all during this game. In part, I think because Allen was a little worried about turnovers, but I think also because, we'll watch the film, but I think we'll probably see really tight coverage from this Chiefs secondary. Justin Reed, Trent McDuffie, outstanding coverage players, and I expect that we'll see tight coverage from them, sort of taking control of this second phase of Josh Allen's passing game. There's the structure, which he's very good at, and then there's the out of structure. Patrick Mahomes is the same way, right? But this defense bottled Allen up a little bit better than normal.
Bills turned the ball over on downs 2 out of their final 3 possessions. So they didn't have a turnover. Ironically, KC technically loses the turnover battle 1-0, but 2 huge turnovers on downs in the fourth quarter. And yeah, man, I mean, I think at this point, Spags and Chris Jones and those guys are getting their just due. But when we write this whole story about this Chiefs dynasty, whenever it ends, if it ends at this point, I think maybe that's a fair question to ask. They're going to deserve a healthy amount of it. And yeah, I thought it was very apropos that in a year where they've had probably as big of a role in the getting to the game as we've ever seen, they had a huge, huge role in getting this thing across the finish line.
Yeah, and man, is the weeks to come, the discussion is going to be about greatness, isn't it? Like, about this dynasty, about this quarterback, about this coach, about this defensive coordinator, about this defensive tackle, about this tight end. I mean, every single one of those guys, names not mentioned, obviously, but you know who I'm talking about, because they are in the conversation to be the greatest of all time at their respective positions. So it's going to be the anticipation for this upcoming game, because, I know you spoke to Ralph about the Eagles, but guess what? They just put up 50 points
in a conference championship
game. In the conference championship, and that is not going to be a friendly matchup. We saw how much it took Mahomes to beat Jalen Hurts and company 2 years ago in the Super Bowl. Mahomes left the game like on a stretcher, given how bad his ankle was, and that's obviously an exaggeration, but it's going to be a remarkable matchup seeing these two. And the truth is, the Eagles are probably the most talented roster on the NFL. I had, as I gave them on this podcast, I had tremendous doubts about whether they had the cohesiveness from a coaching and emotional standpoint to get to this game. But I think, I don't know, you tell me, like, are they not the most talented roster at the most premium positions in the NFL? Because you might want to say Lions, but then you look on the defensive side, and I think it's Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if we were going to argue Lions, you can't do it with the losses that we saw from the Lions on defense. And yeah,
Right.
I think if I was going to bill this game to a neutral observer, and I want to get out in front of this for a second too, because I'm going to hear so many people say that they don't want this matchup. And I get it. We just saw it 2 years ago. But spare me, because this is going to be a football nerd's dream, because the simple billing is best quarterback in the world, best coach in the NFL right now, the dynasty with the championship DNA against, yes, what I think is the best roster in the NFL. I mean, pound for pound, best running back, best offensive line, best receiver duo, all pro quarterback who played like one in the NFC title game, one of the best defensive tackles, a secondary that runs at least 4 deep, an all pro linebacker. Yeah, this is the best roster in the NFL, in my opinion. And if Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and not to shortchange Chris Jones or Trent McDuffie, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Joe Tooney, like, the Chiefs have plenty of badasses in their own right. But if they manage to overcome this, not that they need another feather in their cap, but man, I really think it would be one.
Yeah. And don't forget that the greatest of all time will be color commentating the game.
He sure will, man. And like as if you needed more, Tom Brady will be watching all of this play out. And I mean, look, I said I had a mountain of stats, so just bear with me, because it feels worth reading off. I mean, for starters, it's another 1 possession win for Kansas City, 17 straight. They already had the record. It's better. I just said first team to ever do 5 Super Bowls in a 6-year span. They would be the first team to three-peat ever. Mahomes is now sitting on 9 straight playoff wins. If he beats the Eagles, he would tie the record, which is held by Tom Brady, by the way. 17 playoff wins is already second only to Tom Brady. He's got a long way to go to catch that, but you're already talking about being second place in the entire history of the league at the age of, I think, 29. And yeah, that's another one, Henry. Third quarterback ever to appear in 5 Super Bowls, Patrick Mahomes, along with John Elway and Tom Brady, and he's doing it before the age of 30. Andy Reid, 6th Super Bowl appearance. He ties Don Shula for second ever. Only Bill Belichick has done it more times. I mean, this Chiefs team is already written into history, but it is something different and very special if they manage to get this one more win.
Yeah. He has already inserted himself into the Rushmore of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. A win in this Super Bowl, as Gronk would call it, Super Bowl LIX. A win in this one, I think, would cement him at the least as the second greatest quarterback of all time. And the conversation really begins after a hypothetical Super Bowl win. You know, I was talking to Chad Henne, who was a Chiefs backup quarterback 2 years ago, among other stops that he had in the league. But Henne, prior to, you know, it was last year, sorry, before beating the, you know, the Chiefs go to so many Super Bowls at this point that it's hard to keep track. But I was talking to Henne before the win over the 49ers, and I was wondering, hey, like, at what point do we start talking about greatest of all time? And Henne said, well, we can't even really entertain the conversation until after this one. Let's see if he wins this one, and then we could maybe start talking about it, right? But even then, like, scoreboard, he's still not really close to Tom Brady. But if you look at the way that Mahomes is starting to rack up Super Bowls and now putting together a sequencing of winning at a rate and in a consistency that we've never seen before, then you start to have a resume that it doesn't match up to Tom Brady yet, but certainly if this is another Super Bowl win, he's starting to check boxes that Brady doesn't have. And then you've got a real resume that can open the conversation of greatest of all time for Mahomes.
On the flip side of this, for any of my Bird fans that might be listening, who are maybe tired of hearing so much glowing praise for their soon-to-be opponent, imagine what it says about this Eagles team if they are the ones that end the run. 3 straight trips to the Super Bowl. I don't need to read off all the stats again, but clearly nobody can get the better of the Kansas City Chiefs in these big moments. If this Eagles team manages to do it with the season that Saquon Barkley has had to get them to this point, in a city that loves its team as much as Philadelphia, that is an iconic sports moment. It absolutely is. I mean, it was a big opportunity 2 years ago, but that was before this run began. At that point, the Chiefs had won championship and they had lost in a Super Bowl. They knew what it looked like to be mortal in the biggest moment. It doesn't feel that way right now. So if the Eagles can topple this dynasty, it would be one of the more impressive accomplishments we've seen in a while, in my opinion.
And we've seen a totally different Eagles team topple, not necessarily topple the dynasty, but certainly create disruption in the Patriots dynasty in the Philly game. Nick Foles, that was the Eagles. In fact, if you look over my shoulder here, I'm not a weatherman, so I'm not good at pointing. You can see confetti from the Eagles win that I covered. That was one heck of a football game, and it would be an interesting, on the flip side, legacy moment for the Philly organization to be a dynasty killer in that sense, regardless of who the cast members are, to see Philly get the opportunity to do that again. I mean, it's a remarkable opportunity, but also, I love the idea of Nick Sirianni becoming some sort of like heel for the NFL. Like, he's already not. I mean, I like him.
I think he's already there, to be honest with you. I
like him in the sense that I don't like him, but that's exactly what a good heel should do.
Yeah, Nick Sirianni is the guy that you love if he's on your side and you're passionately rooting against if he's not, more often than not, and I think that comes back to why I'm guessing a lot of neutrals would rather see a different matchup. But I'm here to tell you, there's so much juice here. There's so much to be excited about with this matchup. We're getting ahead of ourselves, obviously. We will dive into all of that in the shows to come. But another thriller between the Bills and the Chiefs, and a familiar ending. Henry, it was a lot of fun. I will chat with you soon, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. See you in New Orleans.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. That does it for the recap, but we've got so much more coming your way this week. Couple housekeeping notes. For starters, you may have noticed everything happened in the coaching world since the last time we've been on. Cowboys hired a new head coach. Pete Carroll is back in the NFL after a year away. And of course, we got to get into this drama between the Jags and the Buccaneers. I think last time we talked, Liam Cohen had turned down Jacksonville for their head coaching job. Not so fast. A little behind the scenes drama in the coaching world down in Florida. So we're going to get into all of that on Tuesday's show. We're going to talk to Jay Glazer, as we always do, try to get some behind the scenes, try to get some insight on everything that went down with some of these coaching hires over the weekend. So look for that on Tuesday. And then if you want to head over to our YouTube channel, voting is open for our postseason awards. We're going to do our own postseason award show Wednesday for Thursday. Voting, you can vote. Head on over. Tell us who you think should win all of the various end of season awards. And we're going to do our best to hand them out as a little NFL honors preview as we get closer to the Super Bowl. So 2 really fun shows coming up for you this week. And of course, so much Super Bowl content beyond that as we get to New Orleans and get set for Eagles Chiefs. Getting ahead of myself, obviously, but yes, make sure you're subscribed. Go find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your shows. We got 2 great shows coming for you this week and plenty beyond that. I've said it all year. I'm not going to give up saying it now. We got you covered all the way through Super Bowl 59. And after all of that, we know what it is. It's the Eagles and the Chiefs, round 2. Looking forward to it. Really enjoyed these conference championship games. Hope you enjoyed it as well. As always, I appreciate it so much, and I will talk to you all real soon.